right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our day 2 of our Pasco Hernando State College National Entrepreneurship Speaker Series. I'm Sonia Thorne, the Assistant Vice President of Academic Affairs at Pasco Hernando State College. And today we are really excited about having our colleagues here from the National Association of Community College Entrepreneurship, NACCE, Dr. Becky Corbin, as well as our colleagues are from our sister institution from the South, Hillsborough Community College. In-Labs in the house, so here they are, Dr. Andy Gold and Professor Beth Kerly. So thank you so much for joining us today, as well as really sharing the details of your second book, which is really, really exciting that this publication has come out just at a very poignant time in our nation's history, and what we as community college, higher education leaders, and just people in life dealing with what is going on a day-to-day basis to, I say, strive, thrive, and stay alive in this whole entire thing. You can't even wrap your mind around it. That you find a way, as they say. So first, let me just say, again, welcome, and welcome to everyone that's joining us today. I think you'll find that the ImpactEd, very, very visionary outlook, and impact more so, and I don't know, I may be stealing this away from you all, but I found it to be interesting. It's really an acronym about inequality, mindset, purpose, accelerate community, and transformation. So with that, I think what the book really does, and I know you all are going to get into the meat and potatoes of it and some of those takeaways for you, but I think it gives a real great practical aspects for students on how they can apply this skill, how they can develop and become in that right mindset. So that way they can figure out how to navigate this to succeed and do well. So I first, want to point out, as I made mention earlier, this is the second book, but the first book, Community Colleges as Incubators for Innovation, came at another poignant time, right before the pandemic. So I guess I'll open up to you, Dr. Corbin, Dr. Gold, and Professor Kerly. What are your thoughts in regards to doing one right before the pandemic and during the midst of a pandemic?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you, Sonia. Feel free to call me Becky, and we'll go because we are all friends here on a shared journey together. So Andy and Beth, I'll start if you want me to, and talk a little bit about that. I have the books right over my shoulder there. I can tell you the first book that we wrote together, the three of us were involved in that project, and we worked alongside 9 other authors. So I would highly recommend, if you don't want a lot of gray hair, don't take that approach. But it took 2 years. We were very, very proud of the final product of community colleges as incubators of innovation. That whole opportunity came to us as a bird in hand, if you will. Our colleagues, again, from Florida leads the way in so many things. But now president of Miami-Dade Community College, Madeline Pumariega, actually tapped us and said, Becky, NACCE, would you guys want to step up and really write a book that would be practically oriented and tell stories that would inspire people to embrace entrepreneurial mindset, whether they're in urban areas, rural areas, despite the challenges. So Sonia, that was all pre-pandemic, and it was such a wonderful opportunity. We learned about the book publishing business, and I know we have a lot of faculty members here who might at some point have a book that they may want to write. So I throw that out there. If you ever need our counsel on that, we can share our scars of going through that process. But I want to turn it over to Andy to talk a little bit about the bridge between community colleges, incubators of innovation, and our second book, ImpactEd, because that was kind of a fun story of how we got started, and then Beth can chime in as well.
Well, thank you, Becky, and Sonia, thank you so much for inviting us and for all the important work that you're doing and Pasco Hernando State College is doing, and I'm really excited for us to be able to collaborate more actively moving forward. So thanks for doing this. So as Becky said, that first book, 9 authors, Beth and I were the last 2 to join the party.
This is a great story.
Get a panic call from Becky Corbin. Her voicemail was actually kind of nice. It was like, Andy, I got something interesting I'd like to kind of talk to you about. Would you call me back? So I call her back and she's like, okay, we realize there's a gap in the book and we don't have any chapters on pedagogy and teaching entrepreneurship. And, I thought you and Beth would be really great to do it. Would you like to do it? So I'm like, well, yes, of course we'd like to do it. And she says, there's just one little itty bitty thing I need to tell you also. I'm like, what is it? I need the chapter done in about 5 days. I need you to turn it around in 5 days. And I was like, what? 5 days? Like I'm teaching 8 classes. I'm running around with my head cut off. I didn't say that to Becky. I just said, no problem, 5 days. Let's try to shoot for 3, Then I called Professor Kerly, Beth Kerly, and I'll let her tell this end of the story because she actually allayed a lot of my anxiety by searching for information. So I called Beth, and you remember what happened at that point?
That was so funny because Becky called Andy for help, not me. I could have said no to this, This is how stuff kind of flowed. And so Andy called.
You may have known that, Beth. That's why she called me,
Yeah, because Becky knows that you're yes, and I'll ask Beth to help me. So that's how things happen with us. Yes, and so Andy called me and said, hey, Becky called and we're going to do this. And so Andy, when he gets on a project, he is just a beast. I mean, he started researching and writing, pounding stuff out. Like as soon as he heard it, just an absolute beast. And I'm like, dude, it's one chapter. It's not an entire book that we need to write here. I mean, our chapter can't be 600 pages long. And then I had him tell me again exactly what the publisher and what Becky had conveyed. And I realized, this is wild, Sonia, that we had already written a white paper that had much to do with what that chapter was. So we had the start of it. So we preach effectuation. Those of you that aren't familiar with it, you're going to hear a lot about it probably today. And you start with what you got. And I remembered that he and I had taken the time to write that down. And so that really was the basis for that whole chapter. And it saved us because it kept Andy, with some bumpers on him because boy, he can go crazy.
And awesome. So then, Sonia, I get another call, an email, I think this time, but it was to both Beth and I this time. So I can't say it was just to me, from Becky. Hey, I got another book project. And I'm thinking to myself this time, how many people are involved in this one? Is it 20 people, 30 people? What are we talking about here? So she says, well, I got some good news. It's just the 3 of us. But it's always a but with Becky, but it's a full but entire book. It's not just one chapter anymore. It's an entire book, and it needs to be done in about 60 days because the publisher wants to launch this series of books themed around resetting the economy globally in a post-COVID world. So we need to get this done. And so our journey as crazy book authors in the midst of a pandemic began. And I have to say, it was a great journey to go on. I feel really gratified to be part of that project. It was awesome working together with 2 engaged individuals. We learned a lot about writing. We learned a lot about what not to do. So we could save. We feel like we have a whole side gig. We could set up a consultancy on what not to do when you're newbies to writing, But in the end, I think the 3 of us, I can speak on our behalf and say that we are profoundly proud of what we produced and, what can really come of it moving forward. And, I'll let Becky, as you go through this, really share a lot of her leadership in leveraging the book to make some serious inroads with policymakers and others in a very short period of time thus far.
Yeah, let me just add before we get to Becky, I mean, definitely 2 impactful pieces of literature that you all have put together. And I think more so that it just speaks to what needs to be done. And I know that for a lot of us, you know, things are just changing so rapidly. By the time you're writing this, there's more to be done. And so I think you're just going to have to keep writing. I guess that's just the long and short of it. But let me add, and I forgot to mention what we are doing in NACCE. They're so wonderful. They are actually giving away books. So inside of the chat, Becky wrote pound National eShip Week, and they're going to be giving away books to all the tweeters. So please tweet away, and we're going to continue chatting here with Becky, Andy, and Beth. So, Becky, go ahead and tell us about how that. I know she's always telling Becky. I was like, tell us how, as Andy mentioned, that movement is happening with those policy makers and changes, or change makers, I should say, what you all really are. That's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Andy said, it's kind of an incredible story, but I think the lesson that I learned through the pandemic, and I've kind of been trying to learn it for the last couple decades, is that sometimes what we need to do as leaders and as community members, as parents, as whatever our role is to show up. And what that means is that you show up imperfectly, and it's more uncomfortable for some of us than for others. But I think what the first book set us on course to do is really set a foundation for entrepreneurship. One of the things that we did not do in the first book is really have the student voice. And I think that's really important, because the second book is all about the student voice. And I just love that. We were on an event the other day, and one of the students that was a business owner who started her business at Hillsborough Community College in the In Lab talked about how that transformed her family and her sense of identity and her economic well-being. So I wanted to get that in there. But I think, you know, for where we're kind of headed as a country, you know, everybody knows, you know, obviously anybody who is awake knows that we have a new administration in DC. So we didn't know at the time we were writing the book what was going to happen, if we would have a continuation of the current administration or a new administration. And so NACCE, being very bipartisan, we believe entrepreneurship is something that everyone should practice. It's radically inclusive. Everybody has a seat at the table. So we went into it in the spirit of thinking about the book in terms of not being tied to an outcome of an election or a person or anything like that, but thinking that we were going to do this work regardless. And as it kind of became clear to everybody that we were going to have a change in administration, we really saw the book as a blueprint, as Andy said, to rebuilding the economy. Obviously all of the work that you all are doing, and Sonia, you as a leader, an executive leader at your campus, you know, we believe entrepreneurship is not only cross-disciplinary, but it's really about growth mindset. So the way that we structured the book was really kind of dividing it into chapters. So one of the audiences that we were speaking to were policymakers. So fun fact, since we don't have like 2,000 people on this call, I'll kind of draw you into an exciting experience. And so a couple of my colleagues are on the line. But kind of out of the blue, we got a call from Isabel Guzman, who is President Biden's nominee to head up the SBA. And what's interesting about that is that what we laid out in ImpactEd is really geared to something like the SBA that does so much good work, but that work could even be more accelerated. And what we did as people, and I would encourage all of you, whether you're faculty members, administrators, or students, is be ready for that call. And we were ready. We didn't have all the answers, but we certainly had the book ready. And when someone from DC said, you know, oh, by the way, somebody might be calling you, I thought it would be somebody from the Department of Higher Education. I don't know why, but like I had my college brain on. And instead, it was the SBA. And so we had a chance to kind of lean in as an organization and think, how might we take the resources that NACCE has to accelerate? Because we're not really looking for anything other than to volunteer and contribute. So we made a very bold statement. We offered up copies of the book really to everybody at the SBA, but we made really refined policy recommendations that were easy to execute, that looked at equity and inclusion, that looked at business creation by people of color, veterans, immigrants, people formerly incarcerated. So I guess we were imperfect, but we answered the call. And I I'm excited about the future. We keep offering up, we'll do this, we'll do that. And as things in DC get organized, we just want to continue to be that voice of everybody is invited, everybody is inclusive. And I think maybe Beth and Andy might want to talk a little bit about the forward-looking approach for a future that's unknown, Sonia, if you don't mind, and you might want to comment on that as well, because that's kind of the lens at which we're looking at things.
Absolutely, Andy, go right ahead. I mean, it definitely is where we're at. And I think just listening to you just now is exactly what it is. We're not really sure what we're getting into, but we're getting into it. And nonetheless, we want to make some positive changes. So go ahead, Andy.
I mean, I think if COVID-19 has taught us nothing else, it's taught us that the future is uncertain and it's riddled with resource constraints. So I think entrepreneurship as an education discipline is a wonderful training ground to teach people to develop skills to swim in those environments, uncertainty, resource constraints, and be able to flourish. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship education, whether you want to start a business or you don't want to start a business, it provides you with this skill readiness that employers desperately are looking for if you elect not to start a business. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the data that we uncovered and we all kind of observed through the past year and really going back many, many decades previous to that, as it relates to inequity is just really been magnified in the past year. So racial inequality in education, income, and other areas is pretty well researched. I mean, there isn't much dispute there on that front. A person born into a household that's living below the poverty line, that infant child has a 71% probability of living their entire life in poverty, which is an incredibly sad data point. That type of data is widely available. It's only been accentuated through COVID-19 on the health front and elsewhere. But what's not widely researched is the inequities that exist in the small business enterprising realm. So what we uncovered there through different research that we looked at was that 41% of all Black-owned businesses will or have closed in the past year. That is a ridiculous data point. When you compare that to white-owned businesses, 17% have failed in the past year. And the same is true with Latinx and Asian businesses, which disproportionately have suffered on the small business side more so than white-owned business owners. Another data point is that 40%, and this is an important data point, I think, 40% of all revenue generated by Black-owned businesses is generated in 30 counties in the United States. 30 counties in the United States. There are, by my last checking, a little over 3,000 counties in the United States. So 40% of revenue generated from Black-owned businesses is generated in 1% of all counties in the United States. And when you look at those 30 counties, what you uncover is that 20 of those 30 counties were the 20 most hardest hit counties from COVID as a result, which only compounds that problem. So what can be done of all of this? Well, that's where our book comes into play. We believe, and I think we've demonstrated with the work you're doing at Pasco Hernando and throughout the community college system nationally, we've demonstrated that entrepreneurship education is the secret sauce to leveling the playing field of opportunity for others and creating a pathway to prosperity for so many. And I think that that's the main message we wanted to try to get across with practical, real examples is here's the challenge. It's a big problem. what can we do to overcome that? And I think we did a wonderful job of illustrating that in the book.
I felt that what the book really provides is the roadmap. We even have a map on the cover. I think that there's lots of people who want to do something, but they don't know where to begin. The problems seem very large, very just vast. And what can I do as a college faculty, or what can I do as a student, or as a nonprofit executive, as a policymaker? What can I do to make a difference? And what's the easiest route to do it? And the beauty is that NACCE already had these projects in place. The centers of practice are all throughout the country, and they're serving as models of how community colleges can engage with communities based on assets that are very unique to them and able to provide value within their own communities through NACCE, to be able to offer those centers of practice across the nation and count on one another for these same things. So that model was already there. And the book really is a call to action. That is at the crux of what it is that we were doing when we were writing. Research informed us, research made us passionate. Andy is our researcher, there's no doubt about it. Becky, subject matter expert on all of NACCE's assets. And then I feel that, kind of my job in this trio was to always keep in mind, who are we writing for in the first place? Becky and I had conversations when we were on our walks, because this was the beginning of COVID. So we're both walking with our ear pods on and saying, we need to scale. That's what's got to happen here. Is we're doing great stuff, but it's in these pockets. And how do we scale? And we need to think big. And how do we get to more colleges and more communities? And we needed to have something that people could read and use as a tool to take that call to action and have any choice of things. There's a whole cafeteria menu in here of ways to engage with community colleges to get that done.
So agree with you, Beth. I mean, it definitely is a time where we're trying to see our places now, maybe. I mean, our place has always been there, but I think we're so well positioned as community colleges. We're in those areas of the data points that Andy pointed out. I mean, there's, all things considered, I don't know, whatever state you're in, there's many of us. I mean, we're never in small numbers, we're in big numbers, and positioned right in those areas that we can affect the most change, as we keep saying, affect.
Becky had the best quote in the book, and I've been using it. We've been out talking about the book in podcasts and panels and stuff, but she had this line in the book, and the word community is in our name. We're a community college. Who is better positioned to serve their community, get through times of crisis than their community college? And it's not just about the programs that we offer, it's all the wraparound services that are included to support a student on whatever journey they're taking, whether it's path to business ownership, to path to a four-year college, to a path to employment. It's the community college is the best place to help our community. So I love that quote, Becky. I've been using it everywhere. Community, it's in our name. That's the quote.
I love that you do that. And the other thing I think, for everyone on the call is really find your purpose and find your voice, because I think there are a lot of people. I was speaking with a college president earlier in the week from in the Virginia system, and she wanted to wait until she had every single perfect experience before she actually said, she's going to put her name in to be a college president. And she had spoken with, I think, a basketball coach that said, there was an expletive in there somewhere. So I'm not going to say that part of it, but basically just do it. At some point, if you wait until the perfect time where you have the perfect experience and everything perfectly aligns. And I think the thing that was powerful for me in the book too is that our editor said, the three of you need to write your own stories and they need to be brief. So you know, trying to write sort of a long winding tale about, you know, back in Ohio when I was, you know, growing up as a kid or whatever, but to really think about each of us have a story to tell. And I think for me personally, I think why I connected so much with community college is I always sort of felt like that kid that was like thought differently than other people, you know, as just a fun fact, you know, Beth and I sort of tease each other. We came up through Catholic school, and I remember saying to my dad one time, I said, well, why is it that the nuns, you know, can't be in charge? And I remember as a little kid saying that, and he was, you know, a good Catholic dad. That's not the way that it's done. And I remember thinking about that and thinking about, well, why not? Like, why can't they do it too? And nobody said that to me. That was some little kernel that was inside of me. And I think we all have sort of those experiences. And I think Beth and Andy both said it well. Like, what we want to challenge all of you, because you're clearly our people, or you would not be on Sonia's, you know, professional development, which I'm sure you tuned in because you knew it would be fun and maybe a little edgy, is to find out what really drives you and what your voice is. And we feel, the three of us, that community college, whether it's a NACCE college or whether it's your own community college, that you have a place there, whether you have multiple degrees or clearly if you have no degree, but you are a subject matter expert. That I think that will always be the thing for me that keeps me excited and keeps me engaged in the system.
Absolutely. I want to make a point. There's a statement in the book. There's a couple statements, but it's right at the beginning, and I want to read it verbatim. It says, whatever your gifts are, and this is from Becky, Andy, and Beth. They say, whatever your gifts are, our nation and the world needs them. The time to act is now. Everyone is a change maker and born with an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that right there, those two statements just move me the most, because I think sometimes, you know, it's how do I get there? I have this thought. I mean, you think of all the things you want to change, but it's goes back to what you said, show up, ask questions, be inquisitive. I think this is the time to do it more than ever. Challenge. I have my own little saying, keep breaking, you know, breaking forms and breaking norms, you know, there's some opportunity in there. We just have to find it. So I think definitely the book speaks to that at a great length. And I know you all brought up about, you know, now is looking at how we educate and train these individuals to navigate this uncertainty. So I think we can all see that we're witnessing the reimagining of higher education and what workforce training looks like, where, you know, we're moving things virtually. Do you all want to talk about that at HCC and what you're seeing at NACCE on a national level? And then I wanted to add, maybe bringing into that fold, which I think is, I'm not saying it's new for everybody, but new for some folks, is how we build real strategic, intentional, effective partnerships.
I see that we have Michael Brennan in the house here.
Yeah, HCC.
Yeah, I am so excited to see him here. Michael is really like our internal hero at HCC. You know, he is such a champion for innovation and entrepreneurship, and the work he does in building what is, I think, a leading international program for students to come to HCC and tap into our wonderful education that we offer. But he's a really dynamic leader, so I just wanted to tip my hat to him there. Anyways, to answer your question, Sonia, there is a definitive and undisputable skills gap that exists today in society, and that skills gap is nagging, and a lot of resources are being thrown at it in different ways. But in the end, from the research that we've done, one thing comes to the surface right away. Employers generally are dissatisfied with recent college graduates lacking the requisite skills that are needed from their vantage point. College students, administrators, educators are fairly well convinced that they are teaching the proper skills to students today. And that disconnection is brought to light when you talk to employers. And when you talk to employers and you ask them, what are these skills that you desire that college graduates don't have? One of the things that they say is problem finding skills is needed. A lot of administrators, a lot of educators, a lot of students will say problem solving skills are really important, but it turns out that problem solving skills are not valued, as one example, very much by employers, but what is valued is the ability to identify problems, because if we can identify problems actively early on, it makes solving those problems much more achievable, and the problem itself has less effect. But if we allow problems to fester undetected because people aren't seeing them, well, then that becomes a major problem. So we reflected on that research and we thought, well, what is it that we do that can help here? And we looked at our curriculum and we said, well, gosh, everything we teach in entrepreneurship education is about searching for problems, finding problems, articulating problems, defining problems, and then trying to solve those problems. And when you align a lot of the entrepreneurial competencies with the skills that employers are looking for, you see almost a direct alignment there. So we kind of have broadened our messaging and marketing of the entrepreneurship program. Yes, we have students that start businesses and we're really proud of those businesses, and we've profiled several of them in our new book. But many students realize entrepreneurship is not for them. They don't want to have the burden of running and owning and operating a business that could be really challenging, but they want to bring those skills into the workplace. And we think that by doing that, we're making our students much more competitive, and as a result of that, helping the workforce in general. So that's kind of how I see the connection there.
I'd like to tack on to that. It's very rare that I get to tack on the end of Andy's comments. I like this. That's great. What we did too is we built the in-lab. And so we wanted a place where, or activities where students could practice those skills, hone those skills that are needed in the workforce. And so the in-lab, through being a design thinking center of practice with NACCE, we're able to leverage our own students and their capabilities in design thinking and put them on teams where they're working with people from outside the college to practice the skills of empathy building, because that's where design thinking begins, and prototyping and testing and all these great skills that are needed in the workforce now. And so the in-lab itself, I think, is an actual product that speaks to what the workforce needs and the college's ability to be able to offer something that's different than an internship, but it's just part of our regularly programmed things within the college to help our students.
I think two related points that speak not only to data and what employers or what communities need is people that really have the mindset like what we've been talking about, that they're not, just saying poor me, or I can't do this, or they're looking at adversity as being the end of the road, but they're looking at how can I bring things to the table that matter. I think part of what we try to do through NACCE and our 350 plus colleges and people like all of you on the call today is really try to create that culture that encourages innovation, which is inherent in co-creating new things. And if I think about NACCE and probably the greatest value that we bring to the table, it's by connecting people and institutions that wouldn't otherwise be connected to address problems and create things that didn't exist before. And to me, that is the greatest value proposition that an association can have. I mean, clearly we're a nonprofit, but we've gotten very good at partnering with large corporations that have a problem to solve, whether it's social responsibility and they have dollars that they want to invest. Our message to them is, give it to NACCE. We will find you, colleges and people like all of you on the call that will help you co-create things and will create amazing stories. And that's part of what our message is as well at NACCE, especially during National Entrepreneurship Week, is, tell those stories, because if you tell people how to do something, or, you give them a long lecture, they tune out and they forget. But if you tell them the story about people that are people maybe sometimes that have been, given up on, that all of a sudden, can have not only a reentry to the middle class, but they bring others along with them. I think, what we see is like the time is now, and the time, Sonia, like you said, and we all talk about is, be bold, because quite frankly, people think during the pandemic, you're not going to succeed anyway. So you kind of have that cover. So, do bold things, but do it with integrity and with character, and don't do it by yourself. That's the thing that we always talk about. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So, I mean, really from NACCE's standpoint, it's an open invitation. If you want to raise your hand, just like I was sharing with all of you, we raised our hand to the new White House administration and to the new nominee. We will do whatever it takes with our resources. Certainly we have a strong membership base, but our spirit is to pay it forward. And that's kind of what we were hoping to do with the book.
And Sonia, if I could just add one thing to what Becky and Beth just said, because I like this. We're like building on each other's comments. So that's awesome. I like that approach. So anyways, resource constraints from our vantage point is the primary fuel for innovation. But oftentimes resource constraints are viewed negatively, like, oh, our budgets are cut, oh, enrollment's down, oh, this, that, the other thing. But if we stopped looking at resource constraints as something bad and instead viewed them as an opportunity to figure out a new way forward, great things can happen. So I just wanted to share with the people that are here a case example of this, at least on a local level for Beth and I. So our college, when COVID hit, and to this day experienced a hit in enrollment like many colleges did across the United States. And there was a lot of emailing, it still is, enrollment's down, what are we going to do? Try to do stuff. So Beth and I, back in March, we took action right away. We got really aggressive with our programming and our marketing reach out. And this spring semester, the enrollment in our entrepreneurship classes is running up 37% as compared to spring of 2020. And it's because we took the scarcity of resources, lack of students enrolling, as an opportunity to really do something about that, and we were animated and really driven to make that happen. So I think sometimes if we change the way we think, change the way we look at the world, great things can come from that. Waiting for stuff to come your way just isn't going to fly today or really in the future.
That is so true. I mean, I think that's just it. I think, and that's the entrepreneurial mindset, is looking for that opportunity in which you can take that, horrible thing or bad thing that's befalled you and turn it around as something really spectacular and trailblazing at times. We see that time and time again. A lot of new things have happened as we all see it in history. Things like during the Great Depression, we've seen a lot of things move from out of that particular period in time. After wars and things of that nature. Heck, after pandemics, we're going to see more of that too. Without a doubt. I mean, PHSC is the same thing. We're looking at ways, doing things differently. We're finding alternate resources, and we're going to keep with the charge because we still have work to do. We have much work to do, and just like all of us here today. And I think that you brought out about is all of those particular areas really comes back to collaborations and partnerships, and it's an easy extending to folks. And I really liked in the book those 5 successful principles of effective partnership. I think this time more than ever, I feel like I've said it multiple times at PHSC, but I think each one of us, like you've mentioned many times, we can't do it alone. We have to come together. Each of us have assets that we can bring to the table. And I think our communities need that more than ever. It's nothing here is a solo venture. So in the book, you make a mention about that those principles are being direct, think ahead, inspire and influence, create community, and think long-term. And I mean, that's what you're saying here today. I feel like parts of that encompass the book greatly. And I think it was very poignant that you tied it into a quote from Martin Luther King about partnerships and relationships between the parties. And I think you're doing, I know there's a lot of great partnerships that HCC is doing with women, with veterans, other communities of practice. And I know that NACCE has many communities of practice. So maybe can you all talk to that about those, and as well as move into the design thinking. I know that's a really particular one with another Florida sister institution at Tallahassee Community College. So would you all like to share that with us?
Yeah, I mean, I can start talking about sort of where community of practice came from and what the purpose is. And I think it would be great, for Beth and Andy to talk a little bit about design thinking and maybe a few of the other ones, because they aren't standalone. They are not designed to be in silos, but probably 3 or 4 years ago, we, as a NACCE, thought about, like, if we really want to grow our membership and our impact, we've got to provide more value. At that time, we did an amazing national conference, one every year, published a magazine quarterly, and did some trainings online, which was amazing. But we thought, well, what does the system need, and what might we provide? And that's pre-pandemic, the whole George Floyd social unrest, pre the Me Too movement and all of these other things. So some of it was fortuitous that we had a board that was really receptive to trying new things. And so long story short, our idea for centers of practice was to have a group of community colleges, in some cases it could be an entire state, that wanted to coalesce around a certain issue and tackle it, using mostly existing resources, although certainly NACCE would sometimes throw in some seed dollars, or in some cases get quite large grants to support efforts. So it didn't have to be a uniform cookie cutter approach, but they were all thematic. So you mentioned design thinking. We have a center of practice on women entrepreneurship. So any of you who are on the call, whether you're early, mid, or you're sort of at the higher stages of your career, we want to bring women together to talk about entrepreneurial mindset and work on that. So that's one of the early ones that's getting started. In Tarrant County in Texas, we have a workforce development center of practice. So they look at some of the issues, Sonia, that you were talking about, like how can we leverage resources and have people focus not only on soft skills, but on the skilled trades. And I think what we have done as a community is to allow our members to really inform and shape those things. I can tell you that design thinking, because I think Andy and Beth both can talk a little bit about that. Because of their national footprint, they focus, of course, on HCC and their local community, but they regularly engage with other partners through the NACCE network, which I think helps NACCE, but it also helps them build out the in-lab and the services that they provide to people in the greater Tampa area. So probably Beth and Andy, you may want to talk a little bit more about your own center of practice and your own experience.
Yeah, when we first started the in-lab, I think the in-lab came before the center of practice, if I'm not mistaken. Andy and I got bitten by the design thinking bug, and we started teaching it in our classes. Then Andy actually designed a class in design thinking, or actually it's called human-centered design, I think is the name of the course. And with the in-lab, we thought, boy, what kind of product might we be able to sell to our community? What's something that our community could use? And how can we use the resources that we have available through the college? So we had some space, we had students, we had faculty, we had we had a decent website at the time. Thank goodness the college has taken that over. We used to have our own because the college wouldn't give us space on their site just for entrepreneurship. So we were rogue and we did it ourselves. But now we're on the college website. See how that works? So we knew we had these things, and we thought, okay, we're going to write this into our grant that we have with the county. So the county supports the in-lab. And so we get a little bit of dollars through that. And as part of the grant, we said that we were going to offer I think 3 design thinking activities to nonprofits and government agencies. And then we would sell design thinking services to for-profit organizations. And that money would then come into the entrepreneurship account at the foundation. So we started doing that. I think that one of our first clients was Hillsborough County School District, and partnered with HCC, and we did design thinking activities with them, wrote out a report. We had students from Andy's class serve as advisors in the design thinking process, and it worked beautifully. So we had this proof of concept. So then when we realized that, wow, this would be good to offer to colleges across the country, that phone call to Becky, and okay, let's make this a design thinking center of practice and follow that same model. So we have now done design thinking workshops with, oh my gosh, New Jersey and Massachusetts, and I can't remember all of them. So it's helping us meet our grant objectives because we get to check that box. And then the more stories that we can tell, that helps us locally as well. I'm sure Andy will speak to this too, and I don't know if Pasco Hernando runs into this, but it's like within our own county, we're not really recognized, but nationwide we are. So we're like, okay, well, let's just go nationwide, and then maybe they'll get on board at some point. So and that is helping through that relationship with NACCE and the Design Thinking Center of Practice. That helps a lot. But I'm sure Andy can speak to our Intuit partnership and some other things going on with the Design Thinking Center of Practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other great thing about the InLab when we do these activities is we not only get to share what we're doing, but more importantly, we get to learn from these schools that we do these projects with. And, we learn so much about things that, we thought were true that actually were not true by talking to faculty and administrators and students. And it makes us better able to become better at what we do. What I wanted to do real quickly, Sonia, is I want to read a quote from the book that I put in there because I thought it was really important, and it speaks to much of what we're talking about here, which is this community building, what the InLab is trying to do. So the quote is, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And that quote, of course, is from Martin Luther King back in 1963 as he was sitting in a Birmingham jail cell and wrote that notorious letter that he wrote. And what the statement suggests to us is that we're clearly all connected to one another. But the question moving forward is, how are we going to choose to work with one another? Are we going to work in silos and against each other, or view each other in a competitive framework? Or are we going to learn to work more actively together, as NACCE has advocated for so long? They've been this force for working collaboratively, not separately. Earlier on in our discussion, Beth had mentioned, how do we scale what we're doing? And I was thinking about that as we were talking today. I think we already have scaled. It's just, it's broken up into these fragments across the United States. And it's incumbent on us to cobble together all of these fragments of amazing work being done. And when we do that, we will be at scale at that point, because there is an awful lot getting done. It's just not, it's not connected. So I think as we move forward through all of the stuff we've been through in the past year, I really think that we can do so much when we work together, and I'm confident that we will. So I just wanted to throw that in, because Martin Luther King is a personal hero of mine, as I'm sure he is to many other people, and his words have so much application to what's going on today.
I think one really important point of progress that we've made nationally and through HCC over the course of the last year now that we've kind of been partially shut down, all of us, is building out that Everyday Entrepreneur Venture Fund program. And I have to really take my hat off to Hillsborough Community College and Andy and Beth in particular for getting that off the ground, but also seeing the opportunity of how it could scale and how it is scaling now. And I think they truly are experts on it, although it's one of those, building the plane on the way up, I will say, not on the way down. But one of the things that we ambitiously decided to do during the pandemic is leverage the first $1 million gift by the couple that founded EEVF, as we call it, and boldly say, we're going to raise another $1 million. I mean, that's kind of insane if you think about it. Like, who does that? But again, we come back to the point, no one thinks we can do it anyway. And through, I think, taking a bold move and looking deeply at the success of the prototype, Hillsborough, along with 3 other colleges, we felt very much that we could make inroads onto the scaling. So long story short, during the last year, we pulled in another $900,000 3-year gift that included funding for EEVF and skilled trades pitches, along with several $100,000 of additional giving through an anonymous donor. So I think, because I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, I'd love it if maybe Andy and Beth could speak a little bit about what EEVF is, what it's accomplished, and we write about it extensively in the book through the students that have gotten seed funding and have gone through the in-lab program.
I'll start, and then I'm going to pitch it to Andy, because I think what's really cool for Andy and I is to see how ideas can be happening over here, and then all of a sudden they come together and action happens. So a long time ago, Andy and I were talking about how students just need a little bit of money to validate their idea. They just need that little bit of momentum, just a little push. Not that they need tons and tons of money. And we found it through the pitch competitions, where if one of the students won a pitch competition, just being able to see what they were able to do with that. And it was only $500 or $1,000. It was just this little bit of money. And we had talked about that. But then one evening at a NACCE conference, we were invited to a dinner that NACCE had put on with foundations from all across the country, and then some specific colleges. Andy and I think were the only 2 faculty in the room at that one. And just so happens that Andy got to sit next to this couple, Chip and Stuart Weissmiller. And when Andy heard what their vision was, it completely aligned with what we wanted to do, but did not have the resources to do. So Andy, I'm going to pitch over to you and tell everybody what EEVF is and how that all aligned.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing gift. It's a seed fund for students that complete different criteria depending upon the institution, but generally for us, you have to complete our college credit certificate program, which is 1 semester, or complete our non-credit veterans entrepreneurship training program called Strive. And when you complete that, you qualify to apply for funding. And we have 3 different funding tiers. Up to $8,000 is in the form of a grant if it's awarded to you, with a lot of deliverables. Up to $35,000, if awarded, is in the form of an interest-free loan. And we could share later on or another time how we work that out, because that's a story unto itself. And then the 3rd tier is up to $100,000, which is the maximum you can apply for. And that, if awarded, is distributed in the form of a below market interest-bearing loan. So we use the prime interest rate minus 1.5%, which is unheard of. Both loan initiatives do not require a personal guarantee, which again, very, very unusual in the world of bank lending, but was important to us. And we have funded thus far 21 student businesses in the past 19 months since we've had this program in place. We have about $600,000 to $700,000 in our seed fund right now. And those 21 businesses will generate this year a little over $1.5 million in aggregate revenue across the companies and create 10 new jobs. And that's one institution of several that are advancing this type of work. And when I personally reflect on all of the stuff that Beth and I have worked on locally at our institution, and it's been quite a bit that we've kind of incubated, I have to say that it is the EEVF seed fund that has been the most profound for us, because it has shown people that never thought that they cross that chasm to the other side of a really gratifying and inspiring experience to see students realize that. And all companies thus far, knock wood, have made it through COVID-19 and are really starting to flourish as a consequence of that.
Excellent. Andy, Beth, Becky, I tell you, just having you all here today and sharing the depth of ImpactEd along with your first book, Community Colleges as Incubators of Innovation, but just showing the real impactful work that you all are doing at your institutions on a local level, as well as with NACCE's help. I say help because they've already helped me with Pasco Hernandez State College. And I know I look forward to collaborating with you all as we can work together. But definitely, this has been a wonderful session. I didn't see any questions in the chat. I think you must be able to answer everybody's question without a problem. But I know if there's more questions, I see that Becky has shared her email. So if you are interested in a book, tweet it. You can also do it on Instagram, she stated, but you can email her directly at Corbin at NACCE. So Corbin at NACCE, NACCE.com. And for what it's worth, I thank you all for sharing some of the takeaways here for me as we look at what this work looks like. Really is about the importance of education and, for social mobility, and that entrepreneurship, especially on the small business level, drives that economic mobility. I think one of the words that come to mind for me is accelerate. And inside of the book, there was a talk about creative confidence. And I think that's definitely about that confidence to be curious, to be creative and innovative, and motivate to learn and especially relearn, as I believe these may be really the skill sets for success in a post-COVID world. And I think you all outlined that beautifully in ImpactEd. So I don't know if you have any final words from each of you before we close this session. And I open that to the three of you.
Sonia, I wonder if I could start by telling the story of that picture. And maybe I could turn it, I'll flip it over to Beth and Andy to finish the story. But you see on the poster board, wouldn't it be great if that took place actually at a VentureWell conference, VentureWell is a wonderful organization that supports STEM entrepreneurship. Many of their members are universities, very successful universities. So anyway, we were invited to participate in part of the poster session. So the other folks that participated had these very professionally developed posters, and we decided to use this opportunity to really think about a marketing plan for our book. It was shortly after we had published Community Colleges as Incubators of Innovation. And we had a really fun time doing it. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Beth, to maybe talk the middle part of the story, and then maybe Andy can wrap it up if that's okay, because this was one of the most enjoyable professional experiences I've had in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'll be real fast on it as my closing, as my goodbye today, because this just really sums up who Becky, Andy, and I are. So first of all, Andy didn't know what a poster session was. We were emailing with VentureWell saying, what the heck is this? What are we doing? So it was very academic, and we're not. And so we had to use effectuation again. I was really sick with a cold, very, very sick at that conference. Becky and I had to run to Walgreens in the middle of the city to find poster supplies. So we were buying Post-its and poster board stuff and literally making our poster right before the poster session. And we wanted it to be something that was interactive. Again, not just come up and stare at our poster and us tell you what we do. We wanted to turn that upside down and hear from people about, you know, wouldn't it be great if, and people just let us know what their vision was. And so they have these different categories to win. And I'll let Andy take it from here about how we won the award we did. You see the orange tag up there.
Yeah, so wouldn't it be great if is like a mantra of design thinking. It's a great way to start if you're trying to work with students on solving problems, big, broad. Wouldn't it be great if there's no poverty in the world? And then you kind of boil it down into something more specific that you can actually do. So like the Post-it notes you can't see, but there were some amazing, wouldn't it be great if suggestions people threw up there. But anyways, the competition, you know, people would walk around, the judges, and they're taking copious notes and asking questions. And some of these displays had lights going off and fireworks and test tubes, and I don't know what was going on there. We just had a board, you know, so I'm like, look, I'm going to just use bird in hand effectuation, a skill that I think I have, which is to always be closing, you know, sell the program. And I just hustled around this room and directed people over to our poster and said, you know, will you please vote, you know, write a Post-it note and vote for us for the People's Choice. And I just kept doing this for an hour and a half. Beth is sick as could be. She's sitting on the floor. Becky is greeting people in her pleasant Becky way. Oh, welcome to Wouldn't It Be Great If? And she's doing her thing, talking about the book. And
have you ever been to the islands when they're trying to get you to come into the tourist shops?
Yeah,
you know,
I'm going all over the hotel. I'm
was
going to the lobby. You know, so finally they announce the People's Choice Award is the Wouldn't It Be Great team. And we were like, yes, you know, we didn't even have a poster when we got to Washington, D.C. for this conference. We worked on it for an hour and 15 minutes max and just hustled and rose to the top. So we were really excited. Then all of a sudden people wanted to go out to dinner with us and have cocktails with us. That was a whole nother story I can't go into right now, but it just shows you what can come from little opportunities when you take action and you don't.
Partnerships. It was all partnerships. Becky and I working together, Andy using his best skills of just being in people's faces and closing.
BSing. Yeah, my skill is BSing.
This was fun, Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I mean, it's been a pleasure. I think we should probably make the next one the 2-hour session, and probably it would be no problem. And I thank everyone that joined us today. I hope you learned a lot, get the book or tweet it, probably get the book for free. And if you're at another institution or what have you, I know I've been slowly, I guess, you know, pushing it out just to key people as well. I think it's got a lot of value for where we're at and where we want to be in the future. So thank you all so much and have a great Tuesday afternoon and enjoy National Entrepreneurship Week. Bye.
Bye.